Shouldn't be afraid of bees. Shouldn't be afraid of those creepy crawlies. You should be afraid of me. Shouldn't be scared of the Dracula. Shouldn't be scared of the mummy. Shouldn't be scared of Frankenstein's monster. You should be scared of me. You should be scared of me. The boogeyman under your bed.
You can feel it moving underneath your skin. This living organism is growing inside you, feeding off you and draining your body of its nutrients like a vampiric parasite. When it is finally expelled from your body in a fit of blood, gore, and screaming, you're horrified to find it still attached to you, stuck to your every move, its wailing haunting you all through the night. In a few years, it is still following you like a shadow. You try to lock yourself in the bathroom for safety, but you can hear its footsteps getting closer and closer. You're sitting on the toilet praying it will go away just so you can get 5 minutes peace. The creature starts banging on the door, quiet at first, but then with such quickening strength, you're scared the door will fall off its hinges. It opens its mouth and you can hear its cry. "Mummy, are you in there? Can I have some juice?" Hello and welcome to What a Scream, the podcast where I, your host, Oh Golly Miss Dolly, chats horror movies with our special guest of the week. And in particular, films that have to do with a certain theme or subject that I have randomly chosen out of a cup. So this week, as you could probably tell from the opening, is Parenthood. That is the theme. It is a very scary time in anyone's life who chooses to go through pregnancy and parenthood. It's not all, fairies, rainbows, and unicorns as people like to make it out to be. It's definitely a very dark time in anybody's life. There are several blips in Irish history that have to do with how pregnant people and how parents are treated within our society. So I thought the most ideal guest to discuss this was Irish director, writer Aislinn Clarke. And she has also directed the feature-length film The Devil's Doorway, which is one of my favorite films in recent years. It scared me to bits, and everyone I've talked to just love it and are so affected by it. It is set in the Magdalen laundries, which is a very dark part of Irish history. We chat a little bit about that, and it's downright scary. It actually had me, viewing from behind the cushion, which is a very rare thing for me. So we chat about parenthood in horror films. We look at Rosemary's Baby and The Babadook as examples of horror within parenthood. And we kind of take it from different views. We've got Rosemary's Baby, which kind of focuses on pregnant people being pregnant. And then we focus on The Babadook, which is about kind of the role of parenthood, especially when you're dealing with trauma, grief, and depression. And so we also have a brief chat about art versus artist, because I think if you're going to cover a film like Rosemary's Baby, which was directed by Roman Polanski, who we all know is surrounded by controversy and he's a bit of a shithead, we can't really just brush that under the carpet. So me and Aislinn, we have a quick chat about whether it's possible to separate art versus artists. What are her thoughts on it? I give a few of my thoughts on it. I think it's a really good conversation to have, especially recently with everything that's been going on with a few musicians and, people basically just abusing their power and being shitheads. But anyway, we get into that in our conversation. So here is my chat with director Aislinn Clarke about parenthood in horror movies. I would like to introduce Aislinn Clarke to What a Scream, the podcast. Hello, Aislinn. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you very much for having me.
And how are you dealing with the state of the world right now?
I am dealing with it the same way everybody else is, probably just one day at a time. It didn't really affect my day-to-day management largely anyway, because unless I'm actually shooting something, I'm in the house writing. So I've got away with it a lot better than most, I think.
Yeah. And what is like what do you do, just for people that might not know who you are? What do you do? Who are you?
I am a filmmaker, writer, director. I live in Northern Ireland. I also lecture in Queen's University in Belfast on film and writing. And yeah, that's pretty much covers it.
Yeah, your film, The Devil's Doorway, is amazing. For anyone that hasn't seen it, you have to go and see it. It is incredible. It was one of the first films in a very long time where it had me and my partner actually watching like this. And we don't scare easy. How did you kind of come to the material that is The Devil's Doorway, and how did you develop it? And
yeah, well, for people who haven't seen it, The Devil's Doorway is, and a lot of people instantly balk at this, it's a found footage film set in a Magdalen laundry in 1960 in Ireland. And how I came to this was really quite a roundabout thing. So when I left film school in 2004, I went to work in TV straight away, pretty much. And I was in research and development, coming up with program ideas, researching things. I was mostly interested in documentaries. I did a lot of research for Magdalen Laundry's documentary that was developed but never ended up getting made. But I'd done years worth of research, talking to people who had been born in these places and were looking for their mothers, or some of them who weren't looking for their mothers, just been born. Talking to people who had been in these places. There are women today, not that much older than me, who were in these places. So that is where I did so much research, and I really developed a sense of the injustice of the whole thing. I felt so strongly about it, and I felt so moved by the stories that I heard. I myself had my son when I was 17, which was 1 year after the last Magdalen Laundry in Ireland closed.
wow.
So I just thought I could have been one of these girls, if it had been a little bit sooner, or if my parents had been different type of parents, or I ended up in one of these places. So I am one of them. I feel like I'm one of them. I understand them, and I have so much empathy for them. So then years and years went past, and I worked on a lot of other stuff, and I lived in New York for a while, and then a few years back, a producer, I was doing a lot of theatre actually in between times. I left TV, I did theatre, I was screenwriting, but I hadn't made a film in a long time. And then I started making shorts again. Northern Ireland Screen, who had funded some of my shorts, put me in touch with a producer who was looking for a director for a project he had. So I met up with him, and it turned out that he didn't have a script or anything. It was just an idea. His idea was to make a found footage film in a Magdalen laundry. Yeah. But he was thinking like more like Blair Witch or Raven. Modern day, get a bunch of young people, put them in there, scare the crap out of them, this kind of thing. And I instantly, because he said Magdalen laundries, I was thinking, this is something that I really care about. Yeah. But also your second thought is, or for some people it'd be your first thought, found footage is a really difficult thing to grapple with nowadays. Because it is cheap to make, it's easier to make, it seems easier to make than a more standard narrative fiction feature film. So you get a lot of people making them really badly. It has a really bad reputation for just not being good, but it's not the form itself that's the problem, it's how it's used. So I thought about it. The reason he spoke to me was because I was known for doing theatre, and he wanted someone who could work with improv. Yeah. So I thought about it, and I think he was speaking to other directors too. And I mean, the desire to want to make your first feature film when you're making shorts is really strong. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. But at the same time, I was like, I can't do this the way he's saying to do it, because I just don't make the best use of the material. I think that the best horror films are located in real human sorrow and injustice and feelings like that. So I thought there is territory there, but it needs to be in a different way. So I met up with him again, and I said, I couldn't do it like that, but I could do it if we do it like this. And I pitched to him, set it in 1960. I had most of the stuff I'd shot had been shot on film. So I said, shoot it on 16mm, which is what they would have used. Yeah. Give it the texture of the time, and really get in there when these places were full of people and when I knew that they existed. And that's how you get into the heart of the human drama.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'll never hear from him again, because it's a different thing. You
Yeah.
kind of get rid of all of the stuff that makes found footage attractive to producers, the cheap, how easy and quick, because now you've got costumes, you've got design, you've got all this. So I thought, well, that'll be that. But, I couldn't do it any other way.
Yeah.
And he got back to me and he said, I actually really love this. And then we got greenlit by Northern Ireland Screen. They were fully financing it. It was a very, very, very low budget.
Yeah.
But it was only a matter of months from that first meeting until all of the principal photography was done. So in the meantime, there was no script, nothing. Everything had to be done double time, super quick, So I wrote the script literally over a few days. I didn't have any time. It was just like bang, 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 get it out,
Wow.
And yeah, that's what happened. It was a weird one.
That's amazing. I definitely think that the way you chose to approach it was almost kind of more respect to the victims of this, Magdalene laundry. It kind of gave them a voice, and it gave them kind of, we could see what it was like. A lot of, say, my generation, we wouldn't know. And we've heard of these horrors, and obviously we empathize, but we wouldn't know. Whereas the approach you took, I feel that it was a lot more respectful to the victims, as well as obviously being a horror film.
Yeah, well, that was the primary concern for me.
Yeah.
I did not want, as I said, spoken to people who were in these places. We'd had like long, deep conversations. I didn't want any of these women to watch this film and feel angry.
Yeah.
My primary concern. That was the thing that mattered most.
Yeah.
So some of them did come to see it, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There were a few women who I'd never even met got together and travelled up from, they must have known each other through Survivors Network.
Yeah.
One was from Galway, and one of them was from Cork, and one from Waterford, I think. They travelled all the way to Belfast together to see the first night that it was in the cinema there, and spoke to me afterwards. And that was really, I was really affected.
That's amazing. Yeah.
That they've come all that way,
Yeah.
But
wow. So obviously you have a love of horror. Otherwise, I suppose you wouldn't have made a horror film. But where did your love of horror begin?
Well, my dad was a big horror fan. He loved films, actually, in general. So my dad worked for a bakery in Dundalk called McCann's. His father and his father before him all worked in the same bakery.
Oh, wow.
And but he really loved films. And he even made films, actually. The first film I ever made would have been with my dad. He had a 16mm camera in the 80s, and we would... and they weren't just home movies, we would stage scenes and stuff. And actually, they were horror films, because usually I would act in them. There's one my mother still has where I'm pretending to be like a silent movie. I'm falling off a cliff, but it's okay. And it wasn't really a cliff, it just looks like that from the perspective. Yeah. So I think that kind of comes from him. But he loved films, westerns. He loved comedies too. He really loved horror. And every Friday night there was... Don't know if you had this, you're a bit younger than me, but some people might remember this. I was a child in the 80s, and there was a guy that used to go around at the weekends with a van, and in the back of the van was all the videos. There was no television yet, and that's how you got your videos. And he would probably also sell minerals and stuff. So every Friday night, Dad would go into the back of the van, and it was one of those things, the kids were never allowed to go into the back of that van, and now as an adult, I know why. He would go in. Would get horror films, and we would watch Hammer Horrors, and we would watch Nightmare on Elm Street. And the first one I remember seeing is Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 7, and I was completely blown away. And I watched it, I rewound it the next day, I watched it again, I watched it several times until we had to return it. And I saw The Exorcist the same year.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I know.
That's young.
Before, so I think it's when you've got that many kids, you start to relax a wee bit. But they used to put me out. They would put you out of the room if it was really like unsuitable. There was something happening. But that was almost worse, because I'd be sitting outside the door going, "What's happening in there?" And all in my head, joining the dots. But that's probably when I fell in love with it.
Oh wow. And so the theme I picked for this week was parenthood. And there's obviously a lot of films that have parents in it and children and, you know, freaky children that see things or children that might not be children. After you had your child, did you feel differently about any particular films that carried the theme of parenthood?
I think there's a weird thing that you go through. Well, my Rosemary's Baby, when that came out, my mother was pregnant with my eldest sister. And so she talked about it. I didn't see it until I was maybe 20.
Yeah.
Because even though I could see The Exorcist when I was 7, she couldn't handle it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because it terrified her so much. She's not a horror fan anyway, but I think there's something about when your child is at the stage in life that they're, you know, if you're watching a film and you have a 6-year-old and there's a 6-year-old and something bad happens, I think you feel it much more than before you had kids.
Yeah.
So my son is 23 now, so that's just everybody who dies in a horror film is that age. Young people partying in abandoned buildings and stuff.
Yeah.
Certainly when he was small, there were things that were really uncomfortable to watch. I hate that, or reading news reports about cruelty to children and stuff that happened would really haunt me and keep me awake at night. You know? I'm sure you do the same.
Yeah, definitely. When I had my son, the film Mother had just come out. And a lot of my friends were saying, don't watch it, do not watch it. And I was like, no, sure, it'll be grand. Like, you know, I have an iron stomach, I'm grand. And then when I did watch it, I was absolutely horrified. I can't watch it again. It's one of those films that I will never watch ever again.
Yes, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've got a small number of those as well.
Yeah.
Can't revisit. Antichrist, I think.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I don't think I want to watch that again.
Yeah, that really freaks me out, because in a lot of these films, this sounds really weird, in a lot of these films, like, children seem to die when the parents are off canoodling, and that really I don't know why that really freaks me out. I'm like, oh, never gonna have sex again ever. But I found also that a lot of films that perhaps used to get to me don't get to me as much now, because I'm like, sure, that's normal. You know, when you look at The Exorcist and she's spewing up things and crawling the walls, I'm like, that's just a normal day with a 3-year-old who's had too much chocolate. Like,
fair point.
Yeah, like, nothing can scare me now. So, as you mentioned earlier, Rosemary's Baby was the film that you chose.
Yeah.
Would you like to give us a brief synopsis about it?
Rosemary's Baby, and as I like to say, it's been out for 60 years or something. So spoiler alerts, you have plenty of time to see it. It's a story. It was originally written by Ira Levin as a novel about a young woman, Rosemary, Catholic, idealistic, fairly newly married, looking forward to being a mother, and her husband Guy, who's an actor. I don't know how they're like, he's an actor, but they kind of present him as if he's got a stable job somehow.
Yeah.
Like,
I was like, how do they afford this apartment?
they use this absolutely gorgeous apartment in the Bramford in New York, which is, of course, actually the Dakota Building in New York. And Rosemary, they make friends with the neighbors. Very nice elderly couple, Minnie and Roman Castevet. And they become pregnant fairly shortly after that. And Rosemary becomes increasingly paranoid and worried that the neighbors and their friends are up to something, that they want her baby. And in the finish, it turns out that she's kind of right, but not quite. That the baby that she's been carrying is not Guy's baby. The baby she's been carrying is the child of the living Satan.
Yeah. Aren't they all?
Just a normal day in New York.
Yeah. So I watched this film before I was a parent. And to be honest, I had just kind of fobbed it off. I was like, it's grand, it's fine, whatever. But I watched it again for this podcast, and it actually gripped me. And I didn't think it would. It absolutely terrified me. Just obviously the themes of the paranoia, and especially being a woman who's pregnant, or anyone who's pregnant, and just the paranoia associated with pregnancy and going through healthcare. And especially being Irish as well, I think that really resounded with me because of obviously our terrible past with pregnant people and pregnant healthcare. So what is it about this film that just attracted you so much?
Well, I absolutely love this film. I think it's so beautifully done from top to bottom. And I think the casting is really good. I think the design gorgeous. It's like I literally do make mood boards out of Rosemary's Baby. It's like we're doing the
Yeah.
kitchen up to get those kind of tiles. I'm trying to find that yellow rose wallpaper.
Yeah.
Beautifully designed, beautifully shot. It's beautifully edited, and it's really scary. And I think the reason that it's so scary is because it gets to the heart of what is scary about being a parent, and particularly a mother.
Yeah.
About carrying a child in your body, and that child then becoming something in the world, because it gets to the heart of, I guess, like Sartrean existentialism. It's like you desire to have a child, or maybe it happens accidentally.
Yeah.
But anyway, you have an idea of this child. The thing is, you can never know them. They come out and they are an individual human with their own desires, thoughts, everything, and you never know who this is going to be. It's like the child is a stranger to some extent. And unlike making, as this how Sartre says it, unlike making a chair, where it's you think I would like a rocking chair, and then you picture the chair and then you build the chair to look like the one in your head. The child is the other way around. With the chair, the essence precedes the existence, and it's the other way. And that's where the horror is located in so many films that are about parenthood. It's about who is this child, and also the fear of the anxiety of them not being someone that you can deal with, of them beyond your control, your power, which is hopefully and usually meant in a good way. You want to love them, care for them, you want them to be happy, but no idea who they're going to turn out to be. So Rosemary has this idea of this child she's going to have before it's even conceived. She's picking names, thinking about who this baby, and then she goes through the pregnancy, has the baby, and of course the baby is not who she thought it was going to be, in a very extreme sense. Baby, but I think it works as a nice heightened metaphor for that fear that parents have. And then the body of the film, of course, you have there's this, you have been pregnant and so have I. So there's this thing that happens when you're pregnant for many people, and for me certainly I felt this, that your body somehow isn't quite yours. Like people feel people just come up and touch you. There is another person actually inside your body moving around. There's a feeling that you can be invaded. Doctors, there's just, you don't have a closed off sense of self anymore. And I think Rosemary's Baby does those two things beautifully. It deals with that sense of the apartment is like is almost like an extension of her pregnant body. She's in this apartment, and actually it's a beautiful apartment and it's what she wanted, but you can hear the neighbors next door in the middle of the night. You don't really have a space that's yours. There's a feeling that there's secret doors, or that people can see you, or that they can enter your apartment. And that's an extension of the anxiety around the body in pregnancy as well.
I definitely agree. That's not something that I picked up on, but now you saying it, I think that was part of it's quite an anxiety inducing film, especially for anyone who has been pregnant, and that feeling of not being in control. And people with Rosemary, people were coming at her from all angles, whether it was the neighbors like forcing themselves into the apartment and giving her weird drinks to drink, or it was the doctor telling her to do things that she felt wasn't quite right, but because he's a doctor and she's just a woman, he knew better. And her husband is atrocious. Her husband, like, he's just the worst person alive.
Yes,
It's just, there's so many points at this film where you just wanted to scream, get out, get out, please get out. Where the night where she's been drugged by this moose that the neighbors dropped off, and she passes out, and obviously she has that vision although we find out it is real, she thinks it's just a dream where, you know, she's basically being raped by Satan. And she wakes up and finds all the scratches on her body. And her husband's like, yeah, I just had me way with you while I was, you know.
While you were passed out. Like,
yeah. And I just felt that was so horrific, especially the way he's so nonchalant about it. And obviously back in those days, marital rape was basically legal.
Yeah, it was totally legal until like 1994 or something over here.
Yeah. And I just found that even before she was pregnant, her body was not her own. It was given over. He basically sold her out to Satanists, like, you know.
So that he would get part to play.
Yeah. It was just, I just found that the most horrific part. And that was, you know, just the beginning of her body not being her own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously we see parallels with, for anyone that's not in Ireland, it's only been recently that we have been able to repeal a law that basically equated the life of a fetus to that of the mother. So when you got pregnant, basically you had no choice over what happened to your body. And I think that really resonated with me as an Irish woman who was pregnant before the repeal came in. How do you feel about the kind of parallels between this and Irish culture?
I think Irish, as you say, it's only a couple of years since we repeal, and historically it has not been a great place here in terms of reproductive justice in particular. And given that I was born and raised in this country, and that's where my son was born, and that's where most of my experience lies, I guess it's kind of something that we carry around all the time, and I don't even know what it would be like to grow up somewhere where it wasn't like that.
Yeah, I still feel now like I'm getting a little bit like choked up about it, just thinking about, you know, even when I was watching this film, I felt just a little bit like, you know, it's, even though this was 60 years ago, this film, I'm still finding, you know, comparisons between what me and a lot of other Irish people have gone through. And I think that is what makes this film one of the greats, is that women and people who can carry babies and be pregnant are still going through this control of their bodies, and not just through reproductive. We've got, you know, trans rights, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement. It's all about people's bodies and people controlling other people's bodies. And, you know, it's just one of these films that really kind of still resonates today. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a powerful film, and I think it's the perfect time and setting for it. New York in the 60s, I think it's actually 1966 it's set in. That's the perfect time and setting for that film. Because it's an inherently anxious place and an anxious time in America. But I think it resonates. It'll probably always resonate. for the reasons that you state, because those are eternal themes, and as human beings we have a real problem with sorting out our major issues, passing them on through the generations, you know.
So what did you think about the whole occult kind of theme in this movie? Because obviously the 60s and kind of early 70s there was a lot of kind of like satanic films. We had like The Omen, obviously The Exorcist. How do you think that Rosemary's Baby, like the dealing of the occult and Satanist setting, kind of works in this film?
I think it's probably the perfect thing at the time. I don't know that it would quite wash the same way today. But I think at the time it was the perfect thing because, as you say, that was kind of the hot topic at the time. There was a lot of fear about Satanists running around doing things, sacrificing kids and God knows what. But and I don't know that it would function without that, because it's kind of the extreme. Rosemary is a Catholic, and she's like, you know, she either is looking forward to or has gone to see the Pope coming to New York.
Oh yes, of course,
That's a big deal anyway, the Pope coming to New York, and the Pope appears in the dream as well, where she gets raped by Satan. And there's this very sort of there's a mirroring of that. And again, it's the idea of what this should be versus the what it is.
Yeah.
And with time and everything, people have different takes on this.
Yeah.
You know, so my mother, when she saw this in 1969, no, it wouldn't have been. Oh no, she saw it later. She didn't see it in the cinema. Whenever she saw it anyway, when she was pregnant with my sister, she would have been Catholic too, just because she was raised like that. And
yeah.
If she was Ireland, everybody was. So, but if you're watching it as like a former Catholic or someone who was raised to be a Catholic but isn't, it kind of has different layers.
Yeah.
You know. So while I think that choice to make basically Satan the antagonist was the right thing at the time, it still works now. I don't think you could do it now, but it still works now because it was set then, if you know what I mean. And it has layers depending on how you understand these things or what your personal position is, you know. I don't know if I made the point that I was trying to make, but
yeah. I mean, the way I see it is we've got this Satanism that is, you know, it seems to be abundant within old people, and they're very, you know, or older people, and they're very set in their ways, and they do things that are ritualistic, and it involves women and pregnant people. And for me, obviously coming from an Irish background, it almost mirrored the Catholic Church, you know. It's very you know, it's a lot with the older generation here that they're still very Catholic. They're still very into their rituals. They still believe that, you know, babies need to be baptized as soon as they come out. Otherwise, they'll go to purgatory or wherever the poor little babies go. Yeah, limbo. And so for me, it was kind of interesting that even though it's portrayed by Satan, you could almost see a Catholic kind of mirror of it.
That's what I mean when that's what I was trying to articulate, basically, that you can bring that understanding to it. So my mother at the time was seeing it more in its face as she's a good Catholic girl and this terrible thing has been done to her. But from our perspective and with everything we know about Irish history and the Catholic Church, we can see it as being two sides of a coin. People who adhere to a strict ideology or religion and put that before a moral code, before thinking, is this good, is this right, on a human level, can do so many bad things. And all throughout history, this has happened again and again and again, not just with Catholicism, but with other religions and other ideological belief systems. This pattern that repeats.
So on another kind of subject of Rosemary's Baby, obviously we have the director, Roman Polanski, and it's hard to discuss Rosemary's Baby without kind of taking into account that he was the director, and obviously he's done not great things. So I wanted to ask about how we go about the question of art versus artist. Are we able to, in the theme of films, separate? Because I know myself, obviously, the director of Jeepers Creepers is absolute disgusting human being, and I will never watch his films. With music as well, we've seen recently with, you know, Marilyn Manson, a lot of musicians who are despicable, disgusting human beings, and I'll never listen to their music again. But I find it very difficult when we've got a film such as Rosemary's Baby, because it is such a great work of art. It is, like, let's, you know, however you feel about the director, it is amazing. And I just find it such an internal morality dilemma. How do you feel about the whole thing?
I think it's a really interesting area, and there are no easy answers to this at all. So I think, first of all, a film is made. If you look at Rosemary's Baby and the credit sequence, which you should, because I really like the song, there's a lot of names scrolling past. It's not just Roman Polanski. This is a landmark film for all of those. There's 60 odd more maybe people that worked on the film, and this was a landmark in all of their careers. It's Mia Farrow's best film for a start. She should get to be proud of that. All of the art department people, they deserve to be very proud of. They made a beautiful film that's so well designed. Every single element of that film is so good that every people deserves to be able to talk about the film that they made and not to have it scrubbed from history just because Roman Polanski. is a bad guy.
Yeah.
There's also the thing where it's very difficult to separate art from the artist, for obvious reasons when it comes to stuff like this. But at the same time, this film has nothing to do with what he did.
Yeah.
It's not in any way motivated by it, or it doesn't feed into it. It's a separate entity as far as I'm concerned. And we don't live in a world where we can have, it's kind of like, some people want it to be like a spaghetti western or something, where the good guys wear black and you can see them coming, and the good guys say bad things. Human reality is so much more complicated than that. And the very fact that someone is a bad person or has done bad things doesn't mean that everything they did is objectively not good.
Yeah.
And I think if we were to dig into the histories of many of the artists that we admire, many of the musicians or composers, even hundreds of years ago, we would find things that we don't like about them. But it doesn't mean that if Beethoven did something bad back in the day, that his symphonies are no good. The objectives are good, and that's a separate, whether or not he was evil. I don't think we do ourselves a service if we try to say only good people do good things.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the way I feel about musicians is, especially with, say, like Marilyn Manson at the moment, I would be quite into like pop punk, and a few things have come out about musicians within that scene, is that with music, especially if they're the lyricist or the singer, is that it's very much their voice. It's very much, their words. And so when I listen to it, I get a bit freaked out. I just feel right now the words have changed meanings, it's, they've done terrible things and now the words have different meanings. Whereas say with Marilyn Manson, take him as an example. When I was growing up, I was that angry teenager who wanted to, fuck the world and I hate everything. And his words really resonated with me because I was very much wanting to be an anarchist of my own world. Whereas now when I listen to them, all I hear is, abuse and, that kind of thing. Yeah. But I think with films, especially as you said, with Rosemary's Baby, it's not just Roman Polanski's voice there. Yeah. It's, as you said, the art department, it's the cinematographer, it's the actors, the composers of the music, it's the original text.
Yeah, Ira Levin wrote the book, and Roman Polanski, that was the first screenplay that he had written, and he didn't realize this is the story. He didn't realize that when you're writing a screenplay adaptation, you can change whatever you want.
Yeah.
Actually, the screenplay is pretty much literally the book.
Okay.
So I don't think we can take that. The story is not Roman Polanski's story.
Yeah.
Thing about Rosemary's Baby, in light of everything that's happened, that I do find really disturbing in a way that it was previously. It was always disturbing, but it's much more so in light of this, is the moment you talk about when she wakes up and she has all the scratches on her back. So she was drugged. Really what happened is she was raped by Satan while she was asleep.
Yeah.
Although she kind of woke up, but she was very, very drugged. And he passed it off the next day as just being him when his nails are too. And I think one of the reasons why we find that so disturbing, at the time in the 60s, people may not have found that as disturbing as we did. They might have thought, well, they're a married couple and she wanted to get pregnant, so what does it matter?
Yeah.
But it disturbs me now because I can see that Roman Polanski, his perspective was that she shouldn't care, that it shouldn't matter. Yeah. Rosemary is not bothered really by that. There is no she doesn't do anything. She doesn't say, "Guy, how could you?" They don't have a fight,
Yeah.
Or I think that is slightly telling about his perspective on women's bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's like he doesn't feel like she should be annoyed.
Yeah.
That it's par for the and that sticks out at me every time I watch it now. I can only think about what he did.
Yeah.
When that moment. But as you say, there are so many people absolutely at their best game in making that film that I don't feel that it's overwhelmed by what he did. I don't think that's fair to all those people and the work that they did.
Yeah, it's not fair on those people just because he's a shitty person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of Rosemary's Baby, would you what's the word? I've got complete brain fog now. Would you tell people to watch it, basically?
Yes, I think anybody who likes films should watch Rosemary's
Yeah.
Baby. And if you like horror films, you absolutely are
Yeah.
completely missing out if you don't watch it. And the thing about I was talking to my husband about this the other day, because I was thinking of it in terms of it being a horror film. And I think in our modern kind of parlance, and when we talk about horror films, it's become a slightly different thing, because when
Yeah.
you think about Rosemary's Baby, there is the dream sequence where
Mhm.
she's in, which is horrific, but it's also kind of very 60s art house.
Yeah.
It's a dream.
Mm.
Even though she says this is not a dream, this is really happening. We're not
Yeah.
sure whether or not it was really happening. But apart from that, there is no horror moment in a modern sense until the end of the film, when she opens the door and sees the black crib with the cross hanging upside down over it. There's anxiety and something that's almost veering into thriller, but not quite. There's a great sense of claustrophobia, but there are no things jumping out.
Yeah.
There are no what we call horror moments.
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody pulling you out of the bed by the leg. None of that stuff exists. And in modern horror, I think there's much more of an expectation that we have to have a bunch of moments like that throughout the whole. So anyway,
Yeah, I definitely feel that it is a social horror. It has a great commentary on social issues. As you said, it's not exactly, afraid to go to sleep, turn out the light kind of horror, but it's in the same vein as, what Jordan Peele has done recently with Us and Get Out. And it's more of that horror where it finishes and you're sitting there and you're thinking, it's one that kind of plays on your mind, and it gets you thinking about what is going on in society at the moment. Even though it was 60 years ago, you're still thinking about, how does this kind of relate to society right now? And I think that's where horrors like Rosemary's Baby, like Get Out, even the Night of the Living Dead kind of trilogy that had social commentary as well. That's why they are such greats, is because they transcend decades, they transcend generations. And I think that's definitely why people should watch Rosemary's Baby.
Fully agree.
Yeah. So the film that I chose for this, you could also say I think it transcends generations as well. Obviously it's a newer one than Rosemary's Baby. I chose The Babadook, which is an Australian film from, let me find my notes. I have a billion notes for The Babadook. I can't find what year. It was quite recent anyway. The Babadook. Everyone knows it because not only
was it like 2015, 2014?
Possibly, yeah, I think around that time. I should have written it down. I didn't. Never mind. Not only did it somehow become a gay icon, but it's also just an amazing Australian film. I really love Australian horror. I think they do it. Australian and New Zealand horror just do it so well.
Yeah, there's something about Australian horror, and I think The Babadook is unlike any other Australian horrors that I can think of. But there's an awful. I mean, they're really good at creating horror, but it's a very distinct kind of. There's a bleakness very often in Australian horror that's really distinct to them.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, obviously there's Wolf Creek that I'm sure everyone knows about because obviously it's based on the true story, but there's also stuff like Lake Mungo.
Yes, Lake Mungo. There's a sadness kind of, isn't there?
Yeah.
Underneath all of those films, including The Babadook.
Yeah.
Lake Mungo is about a grieving family.
Yeah.
Remember correctly? Yeah.
Yeah. So The Babadook, anyway, it is a story about a mother and her son. Her partner has died in transit to the hospital while she was giving birth to her son. And we're kind of introduced from the get-go that she has quite a strained relationship with her son. The very first scene, or one of the very first scenes, is their bed sharing, and he's grabbing her neck and grinding his teeth, and she's like, Yeah, it's actually quite a shared kind of experience, I think, for a lot of parents. But and you can see that she is very overwhelmed, whether it's being overwhelmed by love, and then all of a sudden she just feels just overwhelmed, you know, and like, get me out of here. He goes to a school that's not very understanding for his needs. She has a sister who is just horrible. Again, she doesn't understand her needs. She thinks she's kind of annoying, and her son is a brat. So she's got a very judgmental, unsupportive family. And she seems to just give so much of herself to her son and to her job as well as a care home nurse that she has nothing left for herself. And then one day her son finds a book called The Babadook, and he asks her to read it. And it is very disturbing pop-up book about a monster or a ghost called the Babadook coming and basically killing the family or the child who finds the book. And the thing is, you can't get rid of the Babadook. The Babadook is always there. So she tries to get rid of it a few times, doesn't work. She becomes haunted by this Babadook creature. She even goes to the police at one point, and they just kind of think she's a bit crazy. And then she becomes possessed by this Babadook, and she tries to hurt her child. And then through the love of her child, they capture the Babadook and put it in the basement, basically. That is the basic run through of the Babadook. What did you think of this film?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
I really, really like that film a lot. I like how truthful it is about parenthood, about the reality of parenthood, that I think a lot of people who don't have kids don't get how hard. I think that film illustrates that really well.
Yeah.
I love the character of the Babadook. It's such a cool, unique new monster, and as you say, he's become something of a gay icon somehow. But I think it was so truthful, you know. And my son has autism, and I see a lot of the behaviors in this. And it was like, this child clearly is on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's when people assume that you have a kid, and the narrative is, the fairy tale is that that you love your child, and parenting is really nice, and mothers just love to like hug their children, and it's all very rosy. But actually there's so much of it that is so different, and that film really expresses that very well. And it doesn't mean you don't love your child. It just, there are sometimes when you're like, I could really do it, a spa day. I would really like it. And I think it's as a society, I think we need to be better to parents.
Absolutely.
The pandemic has really illustrated that. How the rest of society thinks about or empathizes with parents, and how difficult it is for them. Don't have a culture that's built around caring for children. People are compartmentalized in their own houses with their own child. Have to deal with all of that and sort it out by themselves. So many people feel so lonely and overwhelmed. So many relationships really suffer because as a society, we just want to hear the fairy tale. We don't want to hear, we just want to hear, oh, I love my kids are wonderful. We don't want to hear I'm really struggling, I need some help. And a lot, hopefully I would like to think that with everything that's happened with the pandemic over the past year, that we might get to a point in society where we take care of parents more. Where childcare is more accessible, and where mothers in particular aren't piled on with so much guilt.
Yes, definitely.
Poppins 24/7. We're human beings. You love your kid, but sometimes you haven't had enough sleep. And just do it, half an hour bath by yourself, be lovely. I remember very much what it was like to have a young child like that. And I was a single parent, so I was by myself. And how she felt, I completely understood. A lot of people watched that film. I remember reading about it at the time, and reading like threads about it and stuff. And a lot of people really, there's a kind of deep-seated hatred for mothers who don't just click into mode the instant their child is born, and who aren't just perfect all the time. And the reality is, I think almost no one is like that. And women hide so much. They feel so much shame and guilt, and when really it's completely normal to feel overwhelmed sometimes, you should be able to say, I need help.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you a bad person. You still love your kid.
Yeah.
In fact, it probably makes you a better parent.
Yeah.
But you need to take care of yourself too. You
Yeah.
can't run on nothing, you know.
Yeah. I saw the Babadook before I was a parent, and I was like, oh yeah, it's grand, whatever. I'll admit it, I was like, Jesus, that kid's annoying, And then
Yeah.
I had my child, and I went through really, really, really bad postnatal depression, like awful postnatal depression. And, I felt like a complete failure of a parent and of a mother, because we are expected to be this like Mother Earth, Mother Nature. I love my child. Oh, it's the best thing I've ever gone through. When really it may be the best thing I've ever gone through because I love my child. It's also the worst thing I've ever gone through,
Yeah.
Just that feeling of complete despair and loneliness and failure.
Yeah.
And you think that, your child is going to never cry and never have tantrums in public. And then they do. And you're just like, and it's this judging society that if you see a child have a meltdown in public, they're like, that child's a brat, that parent can't parent properly. When in reality, that's just what kids do because they cannot regulate their own emotions. They're 3 years old. They don't understand how to not have a meltdown in public. They are just expressing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that fear of being judged as well that really got to me as well.
Yeah, it's because, and I think that it's that narrative, because our entire society in the Western world is built on assuming that mothers in particular will be totally okay with shouldering that entire, because it's natural and they're kind of born to it, and that the minute the child is born, it's like you click into mommy mode. It just becomes automatic. It's instinctive. When the reality is that it's not like that at all, and it's really inhuman to have this narrative so firmly established that people feel like I did, like you did, having a child in public who's having a tantrum, and you feel yourself nearly starting to shake because you're so afraid of, you don't know what to do. You can't stop, and people are looking at you like, look at this one, and assuming all kinds of things about you. We need to.
They're like, you shouldn't bring your child out in public if they're going to act that way. And it's like,
I can just do that, I also need to feed the child. But we need to acknowledge that mothers are human beings. They're not some separate type of entity that's only ever feels Mother Nature vibes and instinctively knows how to make everything better. They are human beings, and having particularly your first child, there's so many things how are you going to know? Nobody gives us lessons in this stuff, and there's so many things, right? And we need to be kinder to people who have kids and who are struggling. It's really, really tough, I've been there. I know and as you do what it's like. So
and I think people need to realize that children aren't something that you can switch on and off. They are little humans. There seems to be this perception that children are just empty shells of humans until they hit about 12 or 13. No, they are actual tiny little humans. And, we all have our sensory kind of things. We all get overloaded by senses. I know that I can't deal with loud noises a lot. I can't deal with a lot of people. That makes me have a bit of a meltdown. And it's exactly the same with children, especially when they have different needs. My son doesn't like, his hair being touched. He doesn't like certain materials. There's a lot of things, and people need to realize that, if you see a child having a meltdown in public, it's not because they're a brat. It's because, they could be having a bit of a sensory overload, and that's okay. And you don't need to be tutting. You don't need to be rolling your eyes or making snide comments under your breath.
Children have emotions too. Adults get depressed or get anxious, and children feel the same things. But as you say, they don't know how to regulate. They don't know how to. If I feel anxious in a public setting, I can look like everything's okay. Whereas the child doesn't know how to manage any of that yet. And it's like people would prefer that we swept everything under the carpet and only
Exactly, yeah.
present the nice face of parenthood,
Yeah.
only the good stuff. They just don't want to see how tough
Yeah.
it is. As I say, the entire capitalist structure depends upon us gladly taking this role, not complaining,
Yeah.
and get as hidden as possible. And I think that's such a disservice to everyone as human beings.
Yeah.
Mothers are
Exactly.
humans. They're not
Yeah.
like robots.
Exactly. Getting back to the film, we see that this is kind of the main theme of the film, is this mother dealing with, or not dealing with, her grief of what happened with her husband, and then this association with, you know, her child's birthday is the same kind of anniversary of her husband's death. We see, obviously, she's probably got undiagnosed postnatal and depression. And we see the Babadook, and especially this book. We're first presented with this book, and it is bright red. And it's like, this is the warning signs of her depression, you know, or of perhaps worsening state of her depression. And we see this, the Babadook is an image of her depression, you know.
Yeah.
Did you kind of get that as well?
Yes, and I also think it's really interesting in light of what we were just talking about. When she goes to that, isn't there a party at the sister's house? Or
Yes.
something?
Yeah.
We find out that she used to write children's books.
Yeah.
So the Babadook is, as in the book, the artifact is. There's a sense that maybe she created it.
Yeah.
I think when you're. Well, the one thing that struck me like a wet slap across the face when I had my son was the understanding instantly that you were supposed to completely subsume everything about who you are and your own desires, and you're supposed to only be about the child.
Yeah.
It's such a bizarre thing, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think you can be a good parent if you do that. You have to continue being interested in things. Nobody wanted to talk about anything else.
Yeah.
You know. Everything was always about the child, and it's like, am I not a human being anymore who is interested, who reads books, who watches films, who ambition and hope and all that stuff, and that gets all wiped out. And I think there's an element of that in the Babadook, that she used to write children's books, and that has been all pushed aside because she's focusing on, well, she's got depression and grief, and she's focusing on raising this child. But and this is how it comes out, because it's never going to be a positive thing.
Yeah.
To put below the surface the things that are outlet for you. So I think the Babadook is like a dark mirror of she should be creating. Yeah. It's healthy mentally.
Absolutely, yeah.
Continue doing the thing she did, which is illustrating.
Yeah.
And writing the books, you know. And so this happens in a bad way, because that's actually the reality. If you try to push these things down, it will come out in a bad way.
Yeah, and we see this when she gets kind of possessed by the Babadook, and she becomes very angry and very, almost like she's going to attack her son. And
she kills, doesn't she?
What was that?
She kills the dog.
She kills the dog. Yeah, that was a horrible bit. I hate it when horror films kill dogs. I'm like, no.
I know. There is a site online. Does the dog die? I think it's called. Okay. Or you can check before you watch the film whether or not there's a dog and it dies.
Yeah, I definitely need to check that out. But we see her kind of, you know, she's trying to fight it. She's trying to, again, like we said, put on this mask of kind of pretending like she's fine. But as we see, it all bubbles up and it all comes to a head. It kind of comes out quite violently. Which I thought was a great metaphor for how it is like dealing with depression, postnatal depression. I know myself, my own experience with it, I did try and push it down. I was like, I'm fine. My go-to phrase is, I'm fine. Of course I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be fine? I have a lovely, healthy, you know, baby, and my partner is wonderful. And you always have this guilt of feeling depressed. You know, you're like, I shouldn't be depressed. You know, I have a roof over my head. I have food I can provide. But it comes out, it just explodes one day, and you're basically left in tatters at the end of it. You know, her house, you know, she starts peeling away at her house, trying to find holes in the house. And that is literally what it is like when your depression kind of just comes to a forefront. It's like your house is crumbling and being torn away around you. And I really felt that with the Babadook. That really got me the last time I watched it. So at the end, she takes the Babadook down to the basement. They managed to trap it. And we see at the end that she feeds it and kind of keeps it down there. And her son asks, you know, how is it today? And she's like, it's okay, you know. And I just, that really resonated with me as well, because my partner is like, you know, he was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. When I did decide to get help, and even he is like, how do you feel today? And, you know, I almost feel like he should be calling it the Babadook, you know, how's your Babadook today? I'm like, grand. And it's kind of this symbol of, you can't ever get rid of your depression. You know, there is no miracle cure. All you can do is learn coping abilities and to feed it once in a while. How did the ending kind of resonate with you? Did you like the ending?
I wasn't 100% sure about the ending, because I think you can read it the way that you read it there. I think that's a good reading. But you can also see it as like a literal compartmentalization.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that it's a bad ending either. I don't need happy endings, you know. But it kind of seems like a happy ending, but is it a happy ending?
Yeah.
Because if the Babadook, and if we take the Babadook as a metaphor for grief, which some have, but I think you're right that it's also a metaphor for depression, then she's literally compartmentalized it, shut the door on it, and it exists down there, but not anywhere else. But is that really it dealt with? I don't know. I think if we're talking about it as a metaphor for grief, I don't think that has dealt with it.
Yeah.
I think grief has to be looked in the face. You have to go through the feelings of grief until you get to the end. I don't think you can turn away from it. Whereas with depression, it's a slightly different thing, as you say. There's always the fear that it never really goes away. It's there somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on which level you're reading it at.
Yeah.
But I didn't dislike the ending, but I felt that I wasn't sure about it.
Okay.
I was a bit sort of, and I do think about it now and then, and whether or not that was the right ending, I don't know. Maybe it was the right ending. Who am I to say? But certainly at the time when it came out, everyone was talking about it in terms of grief, and there hadn't been that many films, particularly horror films, weirdly, because horror is the best medium for us to engage with, think about, unpack, or grisly human emotions, the real raw stuff, because it uses metaphor. That helps us. I don't think drama or anything else can do it half as well as horror. Horror does it well. And everyone was talking about it as a metaphor for grief, and I don't think there'd been many other films that had really grappled with that subject. And in that context, and also my dad had died not long before I saw the film, and I remember going through that grief. It was really like just the thing you had to. There was nothing, you know, you could. There was no way to medicate or make that. You can't. You simply have to feel it. Yeah. You simply have to feel it and ride the wave to the other side. And I didn't know if it was the best metaphor for that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think one thing that kind of stuck with me was when her son did ask, you know, how is it today? And that for me, you know, I've always had this question of, do you hide your emotions from your children? Do you always pretend you're happy? Do you allow them to see you sad? In my opinion, I think it's important to, obviously not to the point where you're overwhelming your children, as we see in the film. Obviously, she's letting her depression or her grief get so bad that it affects her child. But I think it's important, like at the end, where she talks honestly about her emotions to her child, because, you know, it's okay for you to be sad. It's okay for you to be a little bit angry, as long as it's not affecting other people. And I think that's an important lesson to share with children, obviously at age appropriate kind of you know. And I kind of, that really stuck with me afterwards, is how much do we tell our children about how we feel?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would feel that you shouldn't, that you should shield them. But I don't think, I mean, the reality is that this child is a human being who lives in this real world, which is full of, yes, positive things like happiness and joy, but it's also full of sadness, and really quite bad things.
Yeah.
And I think children are capable of understanding so much more
Yeah.
than we give them credit for. And I think if you totally shield your child from everything, all you're doing is creating a teenager who's going to be shocked.
Yeah.
By all of this stuff, because you cannot shield them their whole life.
Yeah.
I think there are gentle human ways of discussing, like for example, it comes up with every child eventually. Death.
Yeah.
Where do we go? What happened to Granny? She's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And I think they're capable of taking in more than we give them credit for a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I always, with my son, I would just have an honest conversation with him about these. He asked me about these things. Approach it with kindness and be gentle, but I would never lie to a child to shield them from the harsh realities of the world, because I think that's the opposite of kind, actually. Because they're going to have to eventually be faced with stuff. So and they can take it in, and they're interested. They're interested, and also they respect it when you tell them the truth. Kids know when you're not, and they respect it when you do. So it's difficult. I mean, being a parent is damn hard, as I've already said. One of probably the most difficult role that you can have as a human being in society. So much responsibility, so few answers. No, the guidebook really, and you just have to figure it out. But at the end of the day, as you say, they're tiny little humans. So treat them like tiny little humans.
So would you recommend The Babadook?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think Babadook's a great film. I think it's a great horror film. I think it's aesthetically really lovely. I think the performances are excellent. I think Jennifer Kent is really, really, really talented. So yes, absolutely. Thumbs up
I would recommend it. But I'd also tell people to go in with an open mind and to kind of look beyond the story. I didn't, when I first saw it, I was very much like, the kid's a bit annoying, and the monster's kind of cool, but sure, it's grand, whatever. But I think if you are kind of not pre-warned, but someone has told you to go in, keep in mind the human emotion behind it, then you'll get a lot more out of it.
I think that reaction that some people have is just it's generally people who don't have kids. And it is that thing of being faced with the reality that parenthood is not just nice stuff, because as a society sweeps all that under the carpet. So I think there's a discomfort with being faced with that, because you don't want to think it'll be like that for you if you have kids, and you also think that other people are suffering like this, But certainly go into it with an open mind and empathy, and try to think what it's like for this woman, and what it's like for a child dealing with these heavy emotions that so many of us know. But it's really a wonderful film.
So out of the two films, when it comes to the theme parenthood, which one do you think you would recommend over the other?
I think when it comes to the theme of parenthood, Rosemary's Baby is about, I think for Roman Polanski, it was about, he had his apartment trilogy, of course, and Roman, or maybe is one of those. It's about the anxiety of the modern city at that time, and about, particularly in New York, that you don't have any privacy. I think it's almost accidental. That is all, not for Ira Levin, because he knew what he was doing, but I think Roman Polanski was primarily interested in the anxiety of the city. But that also maps perfectly onto the anxiety attached with pregnancy, motherhood, not only your own body, but I think The Babadook is more neatly and completely about parenthood, that more so than Rosemary's Baby, because we only get a couple of minutes of her as an actual parent. But the rest of it is more motherhood, or pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Babadook really gets into some of the gnarly truths about what that can be like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, you could almost take them as a double bill viewing, you know, one about pregnancy, one about the actual act of parenthood.
Yes, you could. Yeah. No, I think the Babadook probably wins on that front. I thought about choosing it myself,
Yeah.
but then went with Rosemary's Baby. I think you made the right choice on that one.
Yeah, definitely. There is also there's an Irish film that came out pretty recently, The Hole in the Ground, that also deals with parenthood. I rewatched it again very recently, last couple of weeks, and I don't know how I feel about it as a film, looking at it as a parent, you know. Have you seen Hole in the Ground?
I have, yes, yeah.
And what did you think about it?
I liked it. I wasn't sure about the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't think that was effective as some of the other parts of the film.
Yeah.
I really loved the bit where the wee boy's at the fesh, and it's such a specifically Irish thing, like,
Yeah.
you know, and it all goes real slow, and we get
Yeah.
the sense that he is not to be trusted.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really nice. I think it had some really nice horror moments.
Yeah.
I think probably the thing that didn't quite click with me is what you're talking about. That, or what I thought. First of all, tell me what you were going to say.
I have this thing with films that have this subject of, you know, is the child, or is it, you know, some sort of creature or whatever, a changeling. I have this feeling, perhaps just it's from my own personal experiences, how they portray the mother, that she, you know, she's obviously depressed or she's got some sort of mental health problem. And I feel they always portray these mothers as, you know, if they've got this, then they're not a good mother, or if they're taking medication, they're not sane. And I just don't like that narrative of parents who have mental health problems. I find it quite offensive sometimes. And I feel that even though this film wasn't overtly in your face, like, oh, she takes pills, she's a, you know, terrible mother, she must be slightly crazy, I still felt there was a little bit of it there. And I think that was my main problem with the film.
Yeah. Yeah, the kind of idea that perfect mothers have perfect children.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that is an issue, kind of, as you say, with so many films that have these kind of themes. I think that's a real shame. I think we probably need more people who actually know what it's like.
Yeah, I think that's why I like the Babadook so much, because it is a real, even though obviously it is a fantasy story with this fantasy monster, it is still a very real telling of an experience.
It's empathetic.
Yeah.
You don't feel judged watching that as a parent who had, because everybody has had issues. You don't feel like the narrative is saying that you are feeling somehow.
Yeah.
There's an empathy in it that's lacking in some other films, but so I think more people who actually know what it's like to be a parent making films like this would be a good thing.
Yeah. So before we go, would you like to just tell people where they can find you and what you have, any projects you've got coming up that people can keep an eye out of?
I'm always slightly superstitious about talking about what's coming up.
Especially recently.
Especially recently, the way everything's all up in the air. Well, you can find me on like Twitter and whatnot. And I'm mostly, I'm more so used to, but every now and then I'm more active on Twitter than anything else. Instagram I use just mostly for pictures of my dog.
I always welcome that.
I vibe on there. I have hopefully, well, I mean, I got production funding for a film this year, finance, which I'll be shooting later this year, kind of dependent on how things go with this whole pandemic situation. Fingers crossed. And I've got a few other things in development, or that are various stages of almost being ready to go. But the hope is to be shooting something in Ireland.
Yeah. Great. And before we go, what is your favorite horror film?
I think it's probably Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
I think it's just I can't even find a fault.
Yeah.
Really. You know, it's design, every element of it, costumes, the casting, the performances. I think it's just such a little nugget of a film that does so much so well. So I'd say that's probably my favorite.
Yeah. And what is the scariest film you've ever seen?
Scariest film I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a really good question. There are certain types of films that I do not like to watch.
Okay.
And I don't think that's the same thing as the scariest film.
Yeah.
So I don't like films that are basically just torture porn.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't get anything from it.
Yeah.
And it's pleasant. So I don't like your Hostels, for example.
Yeah. I don't like Hostel.
Some do. And but in terms of like, well, let me think about that. What really? Do you know actually what absolutely scares me, and I can't watch it by myself? Hellraiser.
Really?
Yeah, I find it really scary. I don't know what it is. I can't watch it by myself. If I watch it, I need to put on all the lights and I'm going through it and stuff. I don't know why. It just gets me in that way that it really
Yeah.
there's just something about Hellraiser.
Okay. It's that.
What about you? What's your fave?
Well, my favorite film is The Exorcist. I'm sure that everyone kind of.
Yeah, it's up there for me too.
Yeah. I love the book. I read the book when I was quite young, and I had to sleep with the lights on for weeks afterwards. The book terrified me. The film, I love possession. It's one of my favorite subgenres of horror. And I went to actually I saw the stage show there. Obviously not October Gone, the October before, and that's brilliant as well. Ian McKellen provides the voice of the demon, which is kind of strange.
Yeah.
You know, you've got Gandalf chatting about possessing a child. It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
But it's very well done. I definitely recommend it to people. It's got a lot more undertones than the film conveys. But yeah, I'm just obsessed with The Exorcist. I love found footage horror when it's done correct. As I said, I love The Devil's Doorway. That petrified me. Yeah, I'd go with a lot more of possession. And for some reason, for someone who's not Christian or who doesn't really have a faith, I'm really into films with like Christian kind of iconography or satanic iconography. Yeah, that would
Same
be my
here. I
kind
don't know if it's something we absorb by osmosis in Ireland or something, but same here.
Yeah.
The bit in The Exorcist that really still scares me and always did when I saw it when I was 7. I was too young to see it, but it scared the life out of me. Still does. Is a very quiet moment in The Exorcist when Damien Karras goes into the room. It's almost like he's interrupting something.
Yeah.
And Reagan is the demon we've only seen as powerful and vindictive, and but it's almost as if the demon is vulnerable or scared, and it's paying homage in front of the statue of Pazuzu.
Yeah.
It's like he's interrupted a moment.
Yeah.
And more scary than anything, which in light of Irish historical issues with the Catholic Church blind allegiance to faith kind of makes some sense, because so much bad has been done through blind allegiance to faith. So I think that's spooky.
Yeah, I'm just obsessed with reading about, the different demons of hell, and I just find it absolutely amazing that, I don't really believe in Christianity. It is the word of men, but I'm also really interested in where did all this almost folklore come from? Of, these different demons.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's had a big effect on our lives, so we should be interested.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for being a guest, and I hope you enjoyed dissecting Parenthood in horror.
Yeah, a lot to think about for the rest of the day. Thank you. It was good fun.
Thank you so much, Aislinn.
So that was my chat there with Aislinn Clarke about 2 horror films that kind of center around parenthood. So that's Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby from the 60s. And then we've got The Babadook, an Australian horror film. They take 2 different parts of parenthood, that's being a pregnant person and then being the actual parent after the child is born, and kind of our take on it, our personal take on it, because we're both parents. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any opinions or
you know, perhaps you think there are better horror films out there that kind of depict a parenthood role, get in touch with us over on social media at Instagram and Facebook at What a Scream Podcast, or you can message us over email, whatascreampodcast@gmail.com. And also, I'd like to know, what is your take on art versus artist, separating the artist from the art? It's a really interesting discussion, and there are so many points of views, and we could have a whole episode on this discussion, which I think maybe we might do in the future. So get in touch if you would like to give me your 2 cents. And other than that, if you could just rate, review, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff on the platform that you are listening to us in, I'd be really appreciative, because that is how we reach new listeners. So that is the end of this episode of What a Scream. Thank you very much for listening. And I hope you are staying well. I hope you are watching lots of horror and just looking after yourself. So stay horrific and goodbye.
Shouldn't be afraid of bees. Shouldn't be afraid of